name again is Abbe Edgecombe, SCIP Coordinator for Lincoln, Lancaster County. So as you know, SCIP is spread out all over Nebraska, so I work with about 58 schools in and around this area, and really enjoy it, and really have enjoyed really helping to learn to understand the lives of our youth and what's going on in their world, which is very different than ours a lot of times. And it's a very different world even compared to when many of us grew up. So I'll talk a little bit about that, just to kind of give a breakdown of what I'm going to cover, because I don't have a huge amount of time. I have about 45 minutes or so, but we wanted to at least bring this topic up in terms of how social media may or may not impact youth mental health. I've always been very interested in human behavior. This is a topic I'm really interested in just because I like understanding why kids do and say and act the way they do, and what influences that behavior. And what we know about childhood and adolescence and human behavior in general is it's not black and white. Okay, so what may influence one child in one way is going to influence another child in a different way, and the very same is true when it comes to the influence of social media. There's a lot of gray there. So the goal today with this is really to just raise awareness of what some of those issues are that may arise because of social media, and then to present you as educators or individuals who work with youth with some tools and resources that you can share, whether it be with parents or your schools or your staff, that might help guide you if you run into some issues specifically with mental health and worried about how social media might be impacting that. A little bit on a personal level why this is really important to me. I have a litter of children at home. And 4 of them are tweens. I have 4 12-and-a-half-year-olds. I have 12-and-a-half-year-old quadruplets. And we are just kind of embarking on this. Pray for me, okay? Or buy me wine, whichever you prefer. And so whenever they have friends over, we're kind of that house where everybody comes and hangs out a lot. Some people call me crazy. I look at that as kind of a kids focus group opportunity, because when each of them has a friend over, that's 8 kids at our house. So we do a lot of talking about social media and what they're seeing and what they're hearing and what's maybe appropriate and what's negatively influencing them, but there are some positive influences. So I don't want to walk away from this with the idea that everything we see, hear, or do on social media is bad. It's not. It really has to do with the user, how they can process it, where they're at developmentally. So I am going to talk a little bit about brain development. There's not a lot when it comes to adolescence and childhood that we can't relate back to the brain and why we do what we do. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. If you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to share any of the PowerPoint or resources that we have. So when we're thinking about just social media in general and some of those influences, it's really important that we think about how much it's really changed our kids and how it's changed the way they interact compared to when we did. So example, I grew up in the 90s. How many 90s kids do we have? Woohoo! Okay, so I started junior high. I went to East. East was 7th through 12th at the time. Okay, and so I started East in 1990, graduated in 96. Okay, this is what my world looked like when it comes to technology. Okay, anybody have a computer like that? Where did it sit? In our bedrooms? No, it sat in the middle of our living room or our home office or our family room. And if you wanted to sit down and if you wanted to get on the internet, which was just kind of starting to come out, it made a loud dialing up noise on your internet, right? It got everybody's attention that you were A, on the computer, and B, there wasn't a lot to look up the way that there is now, okay? It's just so much faster on kids' fingertips. This was my Swatch phone. Anybody have a Swatch phone? Okay, so you can talk, if you don't know about Swatch phones, you can talk on either end of it. But if I wanted to communicate, or I had a beef with my friend, or I had conflict, I had to pick up the phone and talk to him, or, shock, gasp, I had to talk to him face to face, okay? We don't see that a lot anymore. And then this was my cell phone that my dad bought for each of our vehicles. I did not have my own car. That my dad purchased when I turned 16. One went in each of our family cars. I was told it was only to be used for an emergency situation. Okay, you can see how little that little screen in. There was no gaming, there was no Facebooking, there was no social media. I could call, and if I was lucky, a friend would leave me a voicemail. That was it. Today, there's our iPad, there's our cell phone. Look at all the different apps and everything that they're connecting with, okay? These computers, portable. They can go in their rooms, they can go to their friend's house, they go to school with them. It's very hard for kids to disconnect unless as adults we're helping to teach them how to do so. And then here we are, okay? We're talking to our friends, we're texting, okay? Our thumbs are getting sore, maybe we're getting arthritis at the young age. But that's the world our kids live in. And so here's a quote I love. Common Sense Media is a great resource. It's a great website. I encourage you to check it out for a number of different resources. But I love this. It says, this generation is the first to have gone through the entire teen years with social networking at their fingertips. So think about that. Like for myself, when I sit down and talk to my kids, I didn't have social media. I learn most from them and other kids because I can't say, I get it. I've been there. I can say I know what it's like to be an adolescent. I can say I know what it was like to be 10, 11, 12 years old, but I don't know what it's like to have my life splashed across social media. What I'm going to share with you today is I have several videos of kids actually sharing some of their experiences and stories. And I go to that as a resource because I think we learn a lot from other kids, okay? They're the ones living it and experiencing it. And we can learn a lot just from listening to some of their experiences. So just a few stats here. Pew Research Institute is a really great source as well for data. I think it's a credible resource that I like. 73% of all teens have access to a smartphone. Digital technology has really changed the way we communicate, and we've talked about that throughout, and I think that that's a pattern that we're going to continue to hear from myself and our last speaker as well. Most of the kids that we know that have cell phones, they're texting, okay? Very few of them use it to make a phone call. We finally broke down and got the quads cell phones for Christmas, and it was everything I could do to not give them cell phones until they became so involved in activities and everything else, and it's hard to find phones. They were borrowing phones, this and that. I will call my kids on their cell phones, and you know what they say? Why are you calling me? Why didn't you just text me that? We don't need to talk about it. And I'm like, well, listen here, I pay the bill. If I want to talk to you, I'm going to call you. Okay? Internet access, okay? Lots of access to the internet. Kids are using that to connect. Social media, when it comes to social media, which to me this is still really surprising that when you look at surveys and polls, Facebook is still #1, which when you talk to youth, Instagram, Snapchat are all I ever hear about. I have a stepson who's 17, almost 18 on Sunday, and he has a Facebook account, but I never see anything on there. He's always on Instagram and Instagram and Snapchat. Same with, I have a stepdaughter who's 21. She's on Facebook a little bit. It's more for show, like, look at me, mom, dad, I got good grades, that sort of a thing. And then everything she doesn't want us to see ends up, I think, on Snapchat. So again, and then be aware of all those apps. I know Justin did a really good job sharing of those apps, and it really is a cat and mouse game when it comes to those apps and what kids are on. And just when we think we know it, something else comes. And for parents, that's my biggest advice I can give is know what's out there. Do your research. Be aware, ask your kids questions, and if you don't trust them, ask their friends. Ask somebody so that you are aware and up on top of it, and that same is true for educators as well. So when you look at just that use, I already mentioned this, Facebook seems to be up at the top, Instagram and Snapchat. What I hear a lot from Facebook is that that's really for old people like us, but kids still have it, maybe just to keep up to date on what might be going on, but they're not using it quite as frequently. So this lady that I'm going to show you, this video, a bunch of my mom friends and I who have fellow tweens and teenagers, I call it my support group. We just think this gal's hilarious, and I think this is kind of a fun depiction that maybe you can share with parents or other people. And she just kind of breaks down, she kind of dumbs down social media for parents. Those are things that I think are fun to share with parents or other teachers or school people. Share that on Facebook, okay? So as I mentioned, before we really talk about some of those influences positively and negatively on mental health, I think it's really important to talk about the adolescent brain, okay? One of the most important parts of that adolescent brain is right here. We all know, all you therapists know what this part of the brain is, that prefrontal cortex. One of the last areas of the brain to develop in our kids, and one of the most important when it comes to judgment and problem solving and decision making and all of those skills that it takes to really navigate things like social media. So when you look at this, adolescence, as we know, is a major time of growth and development. That behavior, I mentioned that, like problem solving, it looks really differently in the teenage brain compared to our brain. So it's really easy for us as parents or teachers to say, just don't post that, okay? Just get off of that. Take a break from social media. Their brain is telling them, I need to be on this, I need to be on this, because that's what all their friends are doing. That prefrontal cortex that helps us think before we act is one of the last parts of the brain. So sometimes that when we talk about that, you need to pause before you post, that can be a hard skill for kids to get. So we have to continually reinforce the importance of that. And then we have that whole emotion versus logic. When you look at this, how big that part of the brain is up in the front. Love, emotion. Okay, and down here, look at this little tiny place right here. It says memory for chores and homework. Okay, that's my kids. All right, that just tells the source where I got that from. American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. They've got a lot of great resources on there. So what does this have to do with social media and youth mental health? Well, again, a lot of those important skills that kids need to really understand and navigate social media becomes very complicated because those skills are not quite there yet. So when you look at things like impulse control, right? How to read social cues. How to interpret emotions. Has anybody misread a text ever? Or something that they've seen on social media because they weren't sure what the context or the tone was in what somebody posted? I think we've all experienced that. And then that ability to pause to consider those consequences of our actions, okay? That's a big one, and that's something that comes with time, and it comes with development, and it comes with skill. This is from ASAP Science that talks about the brain, and has anybody ever used ASAP Science? Okay. Well, I encourage you to check it out. They've got some really good ones, not to sidetrack here, but on substance use for kids and understanding what like marijuana does to the brain and all sorts of different things that are very like clear cut. Here's, helps kids to understand in an easier way. Okay, so the inescapability of today's mobile devices. Anyone know what the relevance of June 29th, 2007 is? This little beauty came out. So it was the release date of the first generation iPhone. What's the significance of that when it comes to mental health? There's been some research out there that between 2010, 2016, the number of adolescents who have really experienced some adverse mental health issues really went up in numbers. As well as suicide deaths among people ages 10 to 19 have risen. That's according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Suicide rate among teen girls reached a 40-year high in 2015. Okay, so is that a coincidence? Is it a correlation? What I'm going to tell you with that is we don't want to get all hyped up about it because the jury really is still out on that when it comes to research. We need to learn a little bit more. But what we know is that there is an association, okay? There's an association. I wouldn't go as far as saying there's a cause and effect, that social media doesn't cause mental health issues, but it might influence it in some ways. This quote that what this generation is going through right now with technology is a great experiment and we don't know what's going to happen. That's very true. We're still learning a lot of it, still very much in its infancy. Again, we need more research, some clearer data, some understanding between the connection between technology and youth mental health. I'm not going to show this because, well, this is 46 minutes long, but I wanted to put it up here, and if you want to just jot down the secret lives of teens, I don't know if any of you caught this. A couple years ago, CNN, Anderson Cooper did this big study on the secret life of teens, and they followed 13-year-olds, okay, and they got access into their social media accounts and they were able to monitor a lot of different things that they were doing, and it was really eye-opening. I'll show you just like a couple minutes as he introduces it, but I think you'll want to check it out so you can watch the whole thing on YouTube, and kids actually tell themselves of how they're using social media and what it's doing to them, and it's really eye-opening to watch. So when we look at the effects of social media on mental health, like I said, research is really still in its infancy when it comes to that, and there's really that idea of, is it the chicken or the egg, okay? Is it that social media is really causing or exasperating mental health, or is it that individuals who are already maybe more vulnerable or have some depression or anxiety, is it that they are on social media more and it's influencing them in a greater way? So a number of studies have found associations between the increased social media use and depression, anxiety, sleep problems, and suicide risk. So we do know that there's some associations there. And again, we have to understand and remember that there are many pathways to mental illness, right? So it's not one or the other. It's a very complex system. It has to do with our environment and development and genetics, and there's a whole lot of different things that roll into that. So we have to be careful not to just attribute that to social media just by itself. So if you've ever posted on social media, do you ever maybe do one of these where you really don't look like this? You really look like this, okay? So that really can be hard for kids to decipher reality versus, you know, that filtering, that filtering that we see during the use of social media. I really feel sorry for that poor fat cat. Okay, so when we look at the dark side of social media, it's really that social media's filtered sense of reality that can lead to a lot of that critically comparing that we do want to worry about. That's where we talked earlier about that role of self-esteem in kids and how that can be helped or hindered. A lot of times it's that lower self-esteem that then ends up leading down to that road of depressive symptoms, anxiety, or other unhealthy feelings and attitudes. I love this little meme here that says, some people see this like as self-esteem. Okay, I think that's true for a lot of kids. I mean, I have seen it with my own kids and their friends, and I'll see something. I have allowed them this year to start Instagram, which was a big decision for us. And we look at it together and we do a lot of different things together. And there was one day where I saw my daughter Katie had posted this great picture of her and her grandma, and they were doing something outside, I don't remember, and I thought it was just darling and super cute and fun. And I went back later to look at her feed after she had gone to bed, and the picture was gone. We had a big discussion over why did you feel like you had to delete that? Well, I wasn't getting enough likes. And I said, well, that's not why. You know, it opened the door. I mean, as parents, sometimes we want to keep them sheltered from that social media, but sometimes as they start to have it, we can open the doors for some really great conversation. And we did have some really great conversation over, are you posting pictures because you are proud of them? Because they're you and they're important and they're special to you? Or are you posting something specifically to get attention of some sort from a friend or somebody? And it really was an important conversation to have at our house. The highlight reel, continually scrolling through edited versions of people's lives that can sometimes lead young people to believe other lives are preferable to their own. As adults, have we ever done that where we look through some of our friends and think, my God, no blemishes, look how great she looks, always going on vacations, I can't afford to go out to eat, you know, that sort of a thing. And as kids, they really do more of that social comparison because of where their brains are at, because of where their development is at. They don't always have the capability to say, maybe that's not all of their life. Maybe I'm only seeing a bit of it or a piece of it. The social endorsement of the number of likes or posts somebody gets, it's really kind of a popularity issue for kids. It really adds to the stress of trying to fit in and be accepted. Think back to when you were 13 or 14, and I don't want to go back really. I mean, that was a hard time as it is, but we didn't have a lot of this social media. We had to worry about fitting in school and with our friends and peers, but it's like it never ends in terms of feeling like you have to fit in. So that report that was done, 80% of 13-year-olds, this was on that CNN special report we just viewed, 80% of 13-year-olds in the study agreed that you can tell how popular a peer is by looking at his or her social media profile. Isn't that disheartening that they attribute that to popularity? Excessive monitoring of friends' online behaviors. We talked about that FOMO, fear of missing out. You know, years ago when I was in school, when somebody had a party or was invited to a sleepover, I may not have known that on Friday when I left from school, and maybe I didn't hear about it till that Monday when I came back. So it wasn't affecting me so personally as to having it thrown in our face right then, right there. I've seen situations where kids will cut out one friend from the picture that they're at a sleepover at or whatnot. And it can really be hard for kids. That fear of missing out or that fear of not being a part of something seems to be exasperated with social media. This is interesting to me when asked 13-year-olds, what is the worst thing that has happened to you on media? Being excluded from parties was one. My best friend hung out with me and hung out without me and posted on Instagram. My friends went out without me and posted pictures on Instagram, then denied they were out together. Not anything specific, but I don't like when people post pictures or tweet about a party that I wasn't invited to, seeing pictures posted by my friends doing things where I wasn't included. The theme goes on. And here's the thing. Part of life is you're not always going to be included, right? Like, that's just part of it. And I don't know if it's that on social media. Kids are more aware of that compared to years ago, but it's something that can be a teaching opportunity for kids too. If you hear your child or your student say, well, I wasn't invited to that and it hurt my feelings. Well, let's think about maybe why you weren't invited. There could be a number of things. Maybe this mom said you can invite 5 friends to this party. Okay, that's just the way it is. Or, having those conversations to help build up that self-esteem that don't take it personally all the time. It's okay. Online cruelty. So again, we talked a lot about cyberbullying earlier, posting about someone else without that filter of really worrying about what that's going to do to somebody else, okay? Not hitting the pause button before posting, letting your emotions guide what you're showing. This other Pew Research study went on social networking sites. How often do you see people being mean or cruel? And about 12% say they witnessed cruel behavior frequently. 29 say they saw meanness on social network sites sometimes. 47 say they saw such behavior only once in a while. And then 15% of social media using teens say they have been the target of online meanness. Again, online meanness versus bullying, right? So it doesn't necessarily translate into cyberbullying, but just something to be aware of those numbers. Key indicators to look for. So when you're wondering if you have a student who that might be struggling with anxiety or depression, and you know that they're maybe overly using social media or relying on social media to guide them, just some things to look for. Low or decreased self-esteem during or after that social media use. So if you have a child who's looking through their news feed and they go and hide in their bedroom, or they engage with others, they don't want to talk about what they've seen. Negatively comparing yourself to others via social media and content. Well, Alexa did this week, and I didn't get to do this. Alexis has this brand new outfit, and look how great she looks today, but I don't look like this. Frequently feeling envious of others while engaged with social media. Using social media as your prime leisure activity. I think that's one of the biggest ones. So if we have a student or a kid who that's their go-to for everything, okay? They're not involved in activity, we're not going outside, we're not maybe reading a book or even engaging with family, that this is their prime source of entertainment, then we might see some more of those adverse experiences. Feeling disconnected from friends and family or not interacting with them in person as often as normal. Again, some of these we have to look at, and some of this is just normal teenage behavior sometimes, okay? I mean, sometimes my kids don't want to hang out with me or watch TV or bond with me as much as I try to get them to do it every single day. But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily mentally unhealthy, right? So you have to kind of look at a cumulative idea of what's going on with their lives. Increased or unusual social anxiety when interacting with people offline, feeling more comfortable connecting with people online than offline, okay? Feeling the need to share everything you're doing offline on social media. Does anybody have one of those friends who constantly posts, went to the gym today, ate a chicken sandwich, picked my nose? I mean, it's, that need, kids have that need too sometimes to just share every little bit of their life online. And then experiencing the negative emotional experience, FOMO, fear of missing out during or after viewing others' online activity. And then finally, consistently using social media as a distraction to avoid or suppress unpleasant emotions. So an avoidance behavior again. So they'd rather be online or in that social world
than having to deal with the reality of what's going on in their lives. This is one video that I definitely want to have time to show you. Has anybody read the Maddie Holleran story? I've talked about this at a couple other schools, but this is actually about a college student who was a freshman in college. So while I know it doesn't relate to K through 12, some of the behaviors leading up to that did happen when she was in high school. And I still think we've got a lot of you who do work with high school students and preparing them for what college experience might be like, and even starting in middle school to prepare kids to know that the reality versus kind of that filtered sense that they see on social media and how it can really influence them personally is important. So Maddie is a young lady who had a scholarship to run cross country at Penn State. And her story is one that she was really dealing with some depression, really dealing with some anxiety, but her social media showed nothing but this picture perfect life. And she was really struggling, and she would see her friends' pictures or they would post things and she would think, well, I don't feel that way. I really feel kind of sad inside, but I should be feeling good because here I am running track, I'm an athlete, I should be getting good grades and doing all of these things, and she really struggled with that. Her story unfortunately ends in suicide, and it'll talk about this on there, but I think some of the insight from this story is really powerful in terms of helping us to understand. She talks a lot about athletes and how it's really important to actually train coaches and individuals who work with athletes to understand and recognize mental health, because oftentimes as an athlete we think that we need to be strong all the time and we need to put on this picture that everything is well and that, you know, we have this exterior about us that is really strong. And I'll let this video do its talking. Just as a quick plug in here, just remembering that social media is not all bad. It really can create a community for kids and help them facilitate support from friends. We do see that. We do see an upside in social media. It can encourage young people to seek help and share information and resources. We see a lot of things posted online and a lot of movements, even with things like suicide awareness and mental health awareness for kids, especially for some marginalized adolescents. You know, they can find online support or friends who are experiencing some of the same things. Now that can go both bad and good depending upon the situation, depending upon the own mental health of that student who's engaging in that. But it does have some good things. In terms of minimizing risk, it's really just important. The best thing we can do is to acknowledge that there are some risks to social media networking. It's not going to go away, so the best thing we can really do is learn how to manage those risks. Continue to look through things outside of social media to promote mental health of young people, okay? So really building up that mental health of young people, building up that resiliency, helping to develop healthy, positive self-image and self-esteem is really key as well. Encourage opportunities for face-to-face human connection outside of social media, finding places to have that direct communication and involvement with others, whether that be an extracurricular activity or a church youth group or something to get away and to get outside of just the online support networks. I'm not going to share that, but that's just another follow-up to that CNN video. So finding a balance, I really think social media for youth is really about finding a balance, okay? As with a lot of things in life, finding a balance. There's a balance to exercise, there's a balance to eating, there's a balance to sleeping. So one of the best things we can do for parents, I think, is education. Encourage and empower parents to be involved in their child's social media use and stay educated on how youth access and utilize social media. So providing parents with tools. This is a really good think. Is something that we can all remember. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Okay? That's something that even at a young age we can help kids to think about when they're starting to get into this stage and age. Communication. Again, not only being aware of what kids are doing, but then having those meaningful conversations and dialogues with our youth and kids about what they're experiencing and how they're feeling and how social media is influencing them in both good and maybe not so good ways, so that we can help guide them in those positive directions. Monitor time, enforce rules to limit that excessive use of social media. A lot of parents have lights out, unplug,
no social or no phones, devices in the bedrooms at night, that's great. Having the rule that at our dinner table, we're not gonna have our phones. We do a family movie night and I have our kids put their phones up and you would think I was asking them to stick needles in their eyes because you can honestly see them like, you want me to what? But it works and it does and they end up fine and we all enjoy the movie. Place an importance on sleep and unplugging at bedtime. That importance of sleep, we all know this as educators, is how important that is and how that can really exacerbate mental health issues. And really fostering self-monitoring skills, and I promise I'm shutting up soon because I know we're running out of time, but helping kids to self-monitor themselves, to know the importance of that. And then developing those healthy attitudes to help minimize that social comparison and envy. Engage about what some of those distorted views that we see on social media, helping to have those honest conversations to say, you know what, sometimes everything you see is not really all it's cracked up to be, and a lot of times when people are posting on social media, we're not putting the bad, we're putting the good, and just know that there's more to life, people's stories and their life stories and experiences. And then again, just promote that mental health awareness. Here are some good resources. commonsensemedia.org, lots of good interactive type things and resources for parents and educators. connectsafely.org, cyberwise.org, those are all good websites, I personally think, that have some good resources and tools and resources. So if you're working with parents and they say, hey, I just don't even know how to begin these conversations with my kids, share those with them. They also have some really great things like where they can develop family social media contracts and what that's going to look like in terms of healthy social media use. So with that, thank you.